I have an anxious dog. Anybody else have an anxious dog? Am I the only one? So this is our second time to have a dog, and we had to get rid of the last dog because he was aggressive. It was very sad. But we're the third owners of our current dog. Her name is Bonnie, and God brought her to us. She's a golden doodle who's actually brown, but she has two previous owners before us, and the two previous owners, I think, were anxious. Well, the first owners were anxious. I don't think the second ones were. And so she took on their anxiety, and she brought it to our house, and she'll just bark for no reason, like just looking at us barking, and it's because she's anxious. And I'll take her on a walk, and the garbage truck will just freak her out. And she'll just freeze and pee and not want to do anything when the garbage truck goes by, and she will not go the direction that the garbage truck went. And then I took her on this path that's by my house, and it's a train track. And so the train comes by on the path, and she just melts and freezes and doesn't want to move. And then I try to keep walking her the direction that the train just went. So she just saw the train go that way. She's just laying down. She will not move. And so in my mind, I'm like, all right, I know that she's not going to be in danger, so I should just keep trying to get her to keep coming. And so after about 5 steps of dragging my dog on the path, I realized I don't think this is the right thing to do. And so I say, okay, Bonnie, we're going to turn around. And so we turned around and we went the other way and we went home. And on the way home, I feel like God taught me something about Bonnie and about me. She was seeing things as a threat that I knew were not a threat. And really that God told me, like, that's what your anxiety is. It's when you see something as a threat that God knows is not a threat. And even though I knew, like, Bonnie, the trash truck is not going to get you. The train is not going to get you. It made her nervous, and it made her anxious, and it made her restless. Now, you and I may not be afraid of trash trucks or trains. Maybe you are. But there are things in our lives that make us feel the exact same way Bonnie felt on the path that day, right? There's things in your life that make you feel nervous. They make you feel anxious. And ultimately, they make you feel restless. And maybe you even have an idea of how to fix that restlessness, and you can't do it. So maybe like it's a financial stress that's causing your restlessness. And you're like, man, if I could just make enough money to live, I'd stop being restless. If I could just pay off my debt, I'd be restless. Like, just buy a house, I would be restless. Good luck with that one. If I could just save up some money, then I would stop being restless. Or maybe it's a relational thing. If I could just find the one, won't be restless anymore. Or if I could just get engaged or just get married, or maybe it's you want a kid. If I could just have a kid, I will stop being restless. If I could just get my dream job, I'll stop being restless. If any of those things are you, I want to tell you, you are hoping in something that's not reality. Because I don't have a ton of experience in life, but all the things that I just mentioned, I thought I would stop having restlessness after I did those things. After I made enough money that I could live, I thought I'd stop being restless. After I got out of debt, I thought I would stop being restless. After I saved some money aside, I thought I'd stop being restless. I thought if I found the one, and man, I found the one. If you know my wife, woo! Yes, I found the one. Got married, got 4 kids. I got my dream job. Doing this is my dream job. Can I tell you, none of those things did it. Because your restlessness is not circumstantial, it is spiritual. And so stop hoping in those things that you see as the fix to your restlessness. It's funny because we were made for rest, but we live in a state of constant restlessness, don't we? God designed us to live this beautiful rhythm of work and rest, hard work, rest easy. And he modeled it perfectly from the start of creation. He worked hard. He created the universe in 6 days. I believe he literally created the universe. You may think I'm crazy. It is kind of crazy that God did that. I believe he created the universe in 6 days. And then on the 7th day, he said, I'm going to rest. Not because God needed it, but because God wanted to model something for us. And then when he created us, he gave us this one thing that many of you, if you're honest, maybe you even see it as a deficiency. You cannot go a day without resting, literally. Without drugs, it is impossible to stay up day after day after day. And when you don't rest, it hurts you. So it's like God built it in. And so this series is the Unhurried life, and I believe I have come to believe that the enemy of your and my rest, in a word, is hurry. So we're in this series, and a few years ago, I read a couple books that really helped formulate my view of the urgency of getting rid of hurry. The first book I read was called Get Your Life Back by John Eldredge. Great read. If you're a book person, get that book. And then the most recent one, probably about 2 years ago, I read The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. And I want to share the quote. I'll share a few more quotes, but the quote that kind of spurred this book's being written is a quote not by the author of the book. The author of the book was John Mark Comer, but the quote that kind of motivated and inspired the book was by Dallas Willard. He's a famous philosopher. He's gone now, but he was giving advice to someone who wanted to know what's the most important thing for my spirituality. Here's what Dallas Willard said. You must ruthlessly eliminate hurry from your life. There is nothing else. Hurry is the great enemy of spiritual life in our day. And then he says it again. You must ruthlessly eliminate hurry from your life. Am I the only one that feels convicted by that? Oh, we live our lives in the default of hurry, don't we? Like, that's the American way. If you described American life in one word, would hurry be the word? Gosh. Getting kids in the car. Maybe you don't even have kids, but getting yourself in the car, speeding down the 78, making sure there's no cops around because you're speeding. Trying to fight the temptation to have road rage in the school pickup lines, like we're going from meeting to house to whatever you're going to. According to Dallas Willard, hurry isn't just one of our issues. It is like the main issue. And a few pages later, John Mark Comer tells us why. Listen to this. He says, hurry kills relationships. Love takes time. Hurry doesn't have it. It kills joy, gratitude, appreciation. People in a rush don't have time to enter the goodness of the moment. Hurry kills wisdom. Wisdom is born in the quiet, the slow. Wisdom has its own pace. Wisdom makes you wait for it. Wait for the inner voice to come to the surface of your tempestuous mind, but not until the waters of thought settle and calm. Hurry kills all that we hold dear. Spirituality, health, marriage, family, thoughtful work, creativity, generosity, name your value. Hurry is a sociopathic predator loose in our society. So this series is an invitation. You are graciously invited to a new way of life. And it is the Jesus way, the unhurried life. We started this series 2 weeks ago. If you didn't get the message, go back to our YouTube and find it. Mike Ulick did an awesome job preaching a passage in Hebrews 4. He talked about how true rest that we've all been looking for since before creation is found in Jesus. And today, man, I love this. We're going to be going to where Jesus himself makes the invitation. So we're going to be at the end of Matthew chapter 11. But before I get there, I want to kind of just admit some myths that we as a society believe about rest. And so everything we believe about rest is not true. And I want to just kind of dispel them. And the problem isn't if you believe this myth one time. The problem is if you keep believing it, and then you keep believing it, and then you keep believing it. So here's the first myth. The first myth about rest. If I just accomplish blank, I will be able to rest. There's a little bit of truth laced into every good lie, isn't there? So accomplishment does make you feel a little bit more at ease. But this is not a true statement overall. If you keep living like this, it's going to destroy you. The second myth is rest is something I have to earn. And the kind of the truth that's almost woven into it is like when you work hard, yeah, you do rest better, but you can't just earn. Rest is not something that you have to earn. Another myth is there's no time to rest if I want to stay ahead. Which, yeah, hard work is required for achievement. But this is not a true statement that there's no time to rest if I want to stay ahead. In fact, you will not get ahead if you never rest. Here's another one. Rest is only for when I'm completely burned out. Anyone who's ever been burned out, you know, that's not rest. That's just being burned out. Another one. Rest is only for, I already read that. I can't rest until everything is perfect. Any perfectionists in the house? The house has to be perfect every single time. Your schedule has to be perfect. whatever it is, it has to be perfect before you can rest. And sometimes that's healthy to want to make things good before you get a rest, but most of the time, you can't keep living this way. So this is the question we're asking today. In order to have an unhurried life, where do I go from rest? And so I want to give you a little bit of just what happens before Jesus issues this invitation. So he has a really busy day, which is funny because he's talking about rest. He starts off, Jesus is teaching just his 12 disciples. And we don't even know what he's teaching them, but it just says, it starts out, Jesus is teaching his 12 disciples, and then a whole crowd comes, and he's teaching a whole crowd. And then he doesn't just preach to one crowd, he preaches to different cities, and he's going town to town, and he's preaching. So Jesus is having a big, hard work day. So don't let anybody tell you that Jesus' way is boring. Jesus is going for it. And then, as he's going from town to town preaching, John the Baptist, who's in prison, sends his disciples to Jesus, and he's like, hey, one of the disciples says, are you the one that we're supposed to be looking for, or is there somebody else? And I think John asked this because he was in prison. And he thought that, Jesus, his cousin, if he's really the Messiah, the heavens open when he baptized him, right, would be willing to get him out of prison. And he had the power to. And listen to what Jesus tells the disciples. He says, the blind see, the lame walk, lepers are cleansed, the deaf hear, dead are raised up, the poor have good news preached to them. And he's actually quoting Isaiah 61, which is the day of the Lord's favor, the Jubilee year. But he leaves out a piece of the prophecy, because the prophecy says the prisoners are set free. And Jesus knew that John actually was never going to see the light of day again. He would be beheaded in prison. And then I believe Jesus says to John, and he says to the crowd listening, he says, blessed is the one who's not offended by me. In other words, John, you're not going to get what you want in this life. And the people who are listening, he's telling them, blessed are you when you're not offended by me. And then he says, he looks at the people and says, he starts talking to them about John the Baptist. He says, what did you expect to see when you went to the wilderness? He's a prophet, right? Jesus tells him, if you believe it, he's Elijah. Come back. And he says, there's no one greater on earth than John. And then he says something kind of confusing. He says, he's actually the least, even the least in the kingdom is greater than John. In other words, Jesus values spiritual life more than just life on earth. Then Jesus starts making a comparison about what this generation in front of him, all these people who are listening to him, this is what they're like. He says, you know what, I'm going to paint a picture for you. You're like kids sitting in a crowded street. And we played the flute. And when people played the flute in first century Israel, they danced. He says, we played the flute and you didn't dance. And then when they're mourning, when they're carrying a dead body, when they're in mourning, they play a song called a dirge. We sang a dirge for you, a song of mourning. And you didn't cry. In other words, he's saying, you are unresponsive to any message. And he tells him, you called John the Baptist when he was fasting. You called him, you said there's a demon in him because he's fasting. And then I come, Son of Man comes eating and drinking. You call me a drunkard and a glutton. And so now Jesus is kind of confronting them. He's saying, these are the towns where I've been doing miracles and they are not repenting. And here's what he says of these towns. There's Chorazin, there's Bethsaida, and then there's the hometown of Jesus when he was an adult. He lived most of his adult life in Capernaum. And he was there. And he was looking at his friends and his neighbors and maybe even family members. And he tells them, you know what? It's going to be better for the city of Sodom than it will be for you. If you know anything about the ancient history of Israel, it did not go well for Sodom. God sent fire from heaven to destroy Sodom. And he's saying this to his hometown. You know how hard it is to tell people you love a difficult truth? Jesus was spent. The reason I'm telling you all this is because I want you to get this picture. Like, Jesus wasn't just chilling all day before he made this invitation to rest. He was going for it. He was in the midst of the work of ministry. The problem is not busyness. The problem is hurry. I love the way that John Mark Comer describes this dichotomy of hurry compared to just busyness. He says, there's a healthy kind of busyness where your life is full of things that matter, not wasted on empty leisure or trivial pursuits. By that definition, Jesus himself was busy. The problem isn't when you have a lot to do. It's when you have too much to do, and the only way to keep the quota up is to hurry. And so Jesus was busy. Jesus was going for it. He was in ministry. Don't let anyone tell you shouldn't work hard, especially for the kingdom, things that matter. So Jesus looks at these people and he talks to them about the nature of revelation. What I mean by this, he says, only people can come to the Father if the Son chooses them. And so the question is, who's Jesus going to choose? What is the selection method of the Son of God? Because only the Son can draw those who the Father chooses. And so he's about to make this incredible invitation. And he's going to answer the question of who he's going to choose. And I want to just read it slowly, and then I just want to walk through it piece by piece. That's all we're going to do today. And so listen to this. Matthew 11, verses 28 through 30. He says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy, and my burden is light." There was a band of European explorers that wanted to journey through the jungles of Africa. And so what they did was they hired local tribesmen to take them through the jungle. And they were hiking through the jungle of Africa, being led by these expert tribesmen. And so what happened was 4 days, they were going for it. They were hiking every day, nonstop, all day, making their way through the jungles of Africa, these uncharted places that Europeans had never been before. And at the end of the 4th day, the tribesmen sat down. And they wouldn't move. And the explorers went to them and said, "Hey, we want to keep going." And they said, "No." And the explorers said, "Why not?" And eventually, through all the translations, they figured out what the tribesmen were saying to them. They were saying, "We have been going too fast, and we need to let our souls catch up to our bodies." I believe that you and I are going too fast. And we have got to let our souls catch up to our bodies. So let's walk through this invitation of Jesus piece by piece. And you may have read it before. You may know all the things that I'm saying, but let it do something in your heart. The very beginning of his statement is so simple. He just says, "Come to me." The King of the universe, the Messiah. He says to you, "Come to me." Come is the simplest invitation. Come requires movement, but it does not require straining. He's not saying you have to hit a moving target. He's saying he's right here. He stands at the door and knocks. He's saying, "Come to the door." There's so many metaphors throughout the Bible of how he wants you to come. He wants you to come to the door. He's knocking at your door. He wants you to come to the feast. He wants you to come to the table. Come to the water. So what Jesus wants from you first isn't behavior or belief. We come to church and we think that. We think, okay, I'm coming here and they're going to tell me I got to behave a certain way. I'm coming here and I got to believe certain things. Sure, Jesus is going to change the way you behave and he's going to change the way you believe. But what Jesus wants from you primarily isn't behavior or belief. He wants belonging. Jesus is quoting Taylor Swift today saying, "You belong with me." This is how he recruited his disciples. He went to them one-on-one. He said, "Come follow me. Come follow me. Come hang with me. Come be with me." He never invited anyone to the synagogue. He never invited anyone to the temple. He's not inviting you to church. Jesus isn't inviting you to a Bible study. He is inviting you to himself. And can I be honest and say, I invite people to church a lot more than I invite them to Jesus. And so I feel convicted even saying that because the truth is that I believe in this church. I'm giving my livelihood to serve and lead this church, but the answer is not church. So if you've been coming to church and you feel like I'm not getting it, it's because the answer is not church. The answer is coming to Jesus. He says, "Come to me." You can only find rest for your soul by coming to him through a real relationship. And let me tell you, keep coming to church too, because what you're going to do is you're going to see Jesus in a way you've never seen him before if you connect to this church body. You're going to experience the presence of the Holy Spirit. Anybody feel the presence of the Spirit as we sang together this morning? It was beautiful. It was comforting. But can I tell you, what we experience together, he wants you to experience every day. Coming to him. He says, come to me. And then he says who it is that's chosen. All who are weary and burdened. He says, come all. He doesn't say come some. He doesn't say come most. He doesn't say just the cool kids come or the weird religious people. He says all. All are welcome at the table of Jesus. I love that. That's why we started this church. When you came in, you saw a sign that said, Jesus is for anyone and everyone. And Jesus says, everybody's invited because we all get weary sometimes. We all get burdened sometimes. You may feel like you're carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders. And can I tell you, you're not alone. Life is hard. We all get weary. We all get burdened. If you're weighed down and you feel like you're the only one, I just want to normalize this for a minute, because the weariness you feel, the burdens that you carry, that is like the quintessential experience of the human condition. We are a weary and burdened people. Even those of us who are faithful to following Jesus, we carry burdens. We carry weariness. That's why we need Jesus. So we're in it together. The struggle is it's not unique to you. And this is the point, right, where Jesus is talking about your burdens. And when he's talking about your wearinesses, this is where he says what's next. He makes this promise. He says, I will give you rest. I will give you rest. I love this because I try to find rest on my own, apart from Jesus. And every time I'm like, it's never great, right? Physical rest only does so much. You know this. I mean, if you haven't had physical rest, you need some physical rest. But can we all agree, physical rest only does so much, but the rest that Jesus offers is a deeper rest that is spiritual in nature. I love the Greek word for rest that's written here. It's anapausis. It's bigger than rest. It's relief. It's refreshment. Yesterday, I took my family to go serve in an orphanage in Tijuana. We had to walk across the border. And on the way back, there's always a line. Last night, there was only a 45-minute line, which is much better than the hour-and-a-half line last year. But we were standing there. You know that feeling in your feet when you've been standing still for 45 minutes? I mean, it starts to feel the same way. It gets worse and worse and worse. Think about that feeling. Think about standing on your feet for half an hour. And think about standing on your feet for an hour. Think about standing on your feet for 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours. And then think about how it feels when you finally sit down. That is what Jesus wants to give our souls. Relief, refreshment. In our world, there's kind of different layers of rest. When you haven't had physical rest, you need some physical rest. But then when you're rested, sometimes you're still restless. Sometimes you're restless because you actually have been resting too much. You need some work. It's time to get to work. Jesus doesn't just prescribe rest, he also prescribes work. That's why what he says next, take my yoke upon you and learn from me. Anybody know what a yoke is? He is no longer talking about rest when he introduces the yoke. A yoke is a thing used to hook oxen together to plow a field in ancient Israel. They still use it to this day. He says, take my yoke upon you. You get a greater production in what you're doing when you are yoked to a stronger partner. And so I'm telling you, Jesus is a good partner to live life hooked up next to. And he's offering this life of working hard and resting easy. And he does the heavy lifting. That's my favorite part. I want to ask you a question. If you had to pick a partner to play 2-on-2 basketball against me, think about who you'd pick for a second. I don't have to think. I know who I'm picking. I'm picking LeBron James. Listen, I know he's getting a little bit up there in age, but he can play the post. He can shoot threes. He's amazing at rebounding, passing. Not sure how much of that he'll be doing in our game. He's not going to be doing any alley-oops to me, right? When me and LeBron beat you and whoever you're playing with, no one's going to say Brian was the MVP of that team, right? LeBron James is the MVP. He does the heavy lifting. But when I'm yoked up next to him, I can't lose. Yeah, that's true. I'm not great at basketball, but I know that if I played you in 2-on-2 with LeBron, we would beat you. And it's not because of me, right? It's because of who you're with. Jesus is saying, take my yoke upon you and learn from me. Learn from me. I like this fantasy about playing you in basketball with LeBron James because I think about like how cool it would be to play with LeBron as my 2-on-2 partner. I'm sure I would give it my all. I'm sure I would be exhausted. But the coolest part would be all that I would see and experience and learn. When you are tethered to greatness, you grow in greatness. I'm not saying I'm going to transcend my natural God-given DNA limited ability, right? But when you are paired in greatness, you grow in greatness. Has anyone seen what Luka Doncic looks like in the last week? Nobody's seen it. It's okay. He was about my frame at the end of the playoffs. Everybody criticized him because he was overweight. And then 2 weeks into an offseason with LeBron as his training partner, he started to look like a Spartan warrior. I'm telling you, when you are paired with greatness, you grow in greatness. That's what it's like when you're yoked up next to Jesus. When you take the yoke of Jesus, you learn what he's like. And you grow in greatness. And I'm going to tell you, the greatness of Jesus is so different than the greatness that we are tried to be sold in the world. This is what he says next. He talks about what his greatness is like. He says, take my yoke upon you and learn from me. And listen to this. For I am gentle and humble in spirit. Gentle, humble. These are not words that I would expect the King of the universe to use to identify what he's like. He's gentle and he's humble. The creator and sustainer of all things. The King of the universe. When I read this, I can't help but just feel so silly for the entitlement that I feel. I'm more entitled than the King of heaven. He's gentle. He is humble. It does something when you see what he's like. Causes you to take a deep breath and reconsider. And you see that he's considerate. He's sufficient. And here's where it leads you. Listen, this is what he says next. And you will find rest for your souls. You will find rest for your souls. I love that word, find, in the Greek. It's horisko. When the ancient mathematician Archimedes was figuring out how to stop getting ripped off by gold, he was measuring the weight of gold. He figured out how to do a displacement in the bathtub using bath water. And he said something that we all say now. We say, Eureka, which means I found it. I found it. There's this aha moment that you find rest for your souls in Jesus. You will find rest for your souls. 2 weeks ago, Mike quoted one of the early church fathers, Augustine. And he said, you have made us for yourself, O Lord. And our hearts are restless until they find rest in you. We have this blank, and we say, if I could just blank, I'll be able to rest. And we're right about the blank. We're just not putting the right thing in the blank. The thing that goes in the blank is just stay connected to Jesus. You will find rest for your souls. And it surpasses everything this world has to offer. He says, for my yoke is easy and my burden is light. We misinterpret this sometimes and we say, okay, following Jesus will be easy and light. No, that's not how it is. Because we are broken human beings. But it does mean the burdens that we feel a lot are not from God. I'll be honest about some of the burdens I feel. I feel the burden of my shame, which I don't have to feel. Because I'm yoked up to Jesus and he took my shame. He scorned my shame. I feel the weight of religion. Religion says I got to do something to earn my place to God. We were never meant to feel the burden of religion. The gospel is different than religion. The gospel says Jesus came down. He's saying, I'm here for you, and I'm taking away all the things you can't measure up to. I feel the burden of social expectations. You guys ever feel this? Man, it's heavy when you feel this burden from your family, from your friends, from society, from social media. whoever it is, you were never meant to feel these burdens because Jesus says, my burden is light. My yoke is easy and my burden is light. So the main point of what Jesus is saying, it's not this earth-shattering truth. It's just a very simple statement that you may already believe. It's this: true rest for your soul only comes through investing in your relationship with Jesus. And if you're a Jesus follower, you know this. But I would bet you don't live it out. True rest for your soul only comes through investing in your relationship with Jesus. And so if you believe this, but there's a disconnect between how you're currently living, what stands in the middle? Your first motivation right now is do this. Admit where you have unsuccessfully tried to go for rest. True rest for your soul is in Jesus. Anything else is a coping mechanism. Anybody else cope sometimes by watching TV? We don't actually watch TV anymore. We stream things. Anybody else cope through maybe isolating? There's a difference between isolating and solitude, right? Isolation is different than solitude. Even though sometimes they look the same, I want to read to you what John Mark Comer says about the difference here. He says, solitude is engagement. Isolation is escape. Solitude is safety. Isolation is danger. Solitude is how you open yourself up to God. Isolation is painting a target on your back for the tempter. Solitude is when you set aside time for food and water and nourish your soul, to let it grow in health and maturity. Isolation is what you crave when you neglect the former. And solitude, as somber as it sounds, is anything but loneliness. In his masterpiece, The Celebration of Discipline, Richard Foster wrote, loneliness is inner emptiness. Solitude is inner fulfillment. In solitude, we're anything but alone. In fact, that's where many of us feel the most connection to God. How much solitude are you experiencing? So the goal for you and I, if we're going to live this out, is to create rhythms for coming to Jesus for rest. You need rhythms in every stage of your life. Like, our life is already divided, right? Like, we have years and we have weeks and we have days. What does your day look like that's helping you connect to Jesus in solitude? Coming to church is great. We connect to Jesus together, but there is something special for your soul, a rest for your soul in coming to Jesus daily. You don't have to do it the way that I do it, but I'll tell you how I do it. I don't do it every day, but I want to do it every day. Before my feet hit the floor, my knees hit the ground. And I just open my arms up before God and I say, God, this is your day. It's not my day. You can interrupt it however you want. Tell him what I want to do. And then I pray the ACTS acronym. Adoration, praising God. Confession, reminding myself and confessing to God my shortcomings, my failures. T is thanksgiving. Man, when I'm done thanking God, I almost have nothing to say at the last one, which is supplication, asking God for things. And then I go downstairs. I got to get up early if I want to do this because my kids wake up early. But if I'm up by 5, I can usually have some time downstairs with my Bible and my notebook by myself. And I'll read until something sticks out. I got 5 bookmarks. Right now I got a bookmark in Genesis, Job, Isaiah, Matthew, and Romans. And I'm just kind of reading in those 5 places, maybe like a chapter every time I do it, until something sticks out. And then I'll do an acronym called SOAP. Maybe you've heard of SOAP. You can look it up later if you want, but it's scripture, observation, application, and prayer. And every single time I do that, it's not earth-shattering, but I feel like I hear from God every time. And it's one way that I just have this rhythm. And then there's one rhythm that I'm not good at yet, but I want to grow in. And it's just called a pause. And I learned it from John Eldredge in that book, Get Your Life Back. And I'll come home, and I'll stay in my car, and I'll just open my hands up, and I'll take a couple deep breaths. If you want to do it with me right now, we'll do it together. Just take a deep breath. Let it out. One more. And I say, Jesus, I give everything and everyone to you. I say it again, Jesus, I give everything and everyone to you. And then I say, I was made for union with you. I was made for union with you. Give me more of you. Give me more of you. I'm telling you, after those few seconds of just pausing, I'm more patient. I'm a better dad. I'm a better husband because I took a minute to pause because we need these rhythms, these daily rhythms, these moments of rhythms. So every day, prayer, word, pause. And then you need weekly rhythms where you're experiencing this beautiful thing that God designed called Sabbath. It comes from the Hebrew word Shabbat. It means to rest. We believe God wants you to have a rest day. And if you serve a lot at church, sometimes your rest day needs to be a different day. For my family, our Sabbath is a different day than Sunday. We're not great at it, but we're trying to get better because we need these weekly rhythms. And then you need yearly rhythms. You need a time for yourself to get away. Maybe if you're married, you and your spouse could do it together. Amy and I are going on a prayer retreat this week. We're going to try to hear from God for a couple days. And then your family, if you have a family, you need to get away with your family where there's no other agenda besides just being in relationship together and letting God speak to you. We did a Discovery Bible study on our family trip earlier this month. It was just such a blessing for us to hear from God together. And if you're here and you feel like, you know what, I've tried this, I've tried connecting to God, and I didn't feel anything. First of all, don't give up just because you tried once and you felt like it didn't work. Second of all, your feelings can't be in charge of you. I don't have this earth-shattering moment with God every morning when I pray. I don't have this emotional high every time I read my Bible or have family worship with my family. But I promise that if you start to invest in the rhythms, you will feel the rhythms. You will feel the power of the rhythms. God honors your commitments. God honors the time that you take to seek Him. Feel the rhythm. So, as a kid, one of my favorite movies was Cool Runnings. Anybody else? Man, I love this movie. I don't know if it stands the test of time. I haven't seen it as an adult. But before every race except one, they would say the same thing. And the one where they messed up, they flipped their bobsled and they tried to copy another country. But every time they would get up, they'd say, feel the rhythm, feel the rhyme, get on up, it's bobsled time. I'm trying to give you a way to remember this. Feel the rhythm. You will feel the rhythm. If you keep seeking the Lord rhythmically, daily, weekly, annually, it is going to do something in your life. It's going to lead to a longevity. We're not going to burn out in ministry. In fact, not only are we not going to burn out, we're going to see revival because we're trusting God when we rest. I'm telling you, we believe revival is coming.